What's happening, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Adventure Box podcast. Thanks to Historical Conquest, who's sponsoring this podcast. Now, here's an essential thing to understand about the Age of Empires. Sorry, Age of Exploration. That's right, Age of Exploration. Unlike the game Age of Empires. Totally different. One is fact and one is history. One is a game. Okay, so the difference between the great thing to understand about the Age of Exploration is that it wasn't just about empire building. Okay, so empires are these great civilizations that are all across the world. Now, during this time, around the 1500s, there were certain European ones that really wanted to expand. They wanted to find new lands. Actually, it's not completely true. When they first started out, all they wanted to do was find out a new way to Asia. That's all they wanted to do. They did not want to take over a new land. They didn't know that there was actually land to take over. And at the time, the only obstacle was the Ottoman Empire. Now, what happened in the Ottoman Empire is if you go into the Middle East was just taken over by the Ottoman Empire around the times of the Crusades. And we're going to go through that in another curriculum. So disregard the Crusades, but around that time is when the Ottoman Empire took over. Why is it essential to know about the Ottoman Empire? The Ottoman Empire is basically the empire that took over all the trade routes between Europe and Asia. There was no way to get to India except through the Ottomans. Now, here's the big thing to understand. The Ottoman Empire was very dictatorial. They had a certain law you had to follow. They had certain rules you had to follow. And they also, and this was what most Christians feared when it comes to the Ottoman Empire, if they captured you and made you a prisoner, you would then be entered into the slave trade. So the Ottoman Empire was a big proponent or a big promoter of slavery. Now, again, this is not African slaves coming from Africa into America. No, these are the slaves that are coming from basically Christian groups who get captured by some means. So if the Ottoman Empire took over your city, they would take everyone that's possible there and would put them into slavery if they didn't do certain things, such as either swear an oath to them or convert to Islam. So because of this, the Europeans did not want anything to do with the Ottoman Empire. They did not want to jeopardize their safety and their lives and their freedom by going through the land that was conquered by the Ottoman Empire. So the Byzantines, Constantinople, which used to be Constantinople, which became Istanbul, Istanbul was basically the Constantinople after it was taken over by the Muslims. So at this point, there's this big fear between Christians and the Muslims. And basically, they did not get along at all. At all. So in order for the Europeans to get over to India, they said, hey, there's got to be a better way. I think we talked about this last week. So they went down the coast of Africa, the west coast of Africa, went around thanks to da Gama, Vasco de Gama. Yeah, da Gama was the one that went down the west coast of Africa and went around the point and was able to come back up the North Africa and then turned around basically saying, hey, we made a new discovery. Let's go back and tell everyone, without actually making it all the way to India. So we're going to be talking about those that went all the way around and made it to India. But here's the thing. It was very dangerous. There were so many ships that were lost around the Cape of Africa because you have two competing tides both coming in there. And it was very treacherous. The storms, the winds, the tides would toss ships to and fro and destroy them. So it was very dangerous to go around that point. But they were able to see, hey, that is a possibility. So what happened? Right before, around that same point, you had Columbus who sailed west. Actually, he went down south and then west and found that there was another country. Then found out there was another way to Asia, because in his head, Asia was what he found. And until his dying day, he still thought that he had actually found Asia. As we know, though, he did not find Asia. He actually found more through the Caribbean area of the Americas. And that's what other people found. Amerigo Vespucci, we talked about that earlier last week. And then we talked about slavery. Now, again, we were doing a precursor of slavery and what that is and what that was. And so let's go a little bit more into what happened next. So the Pope gets this idea. Portugal is one of his biggest constituents. Spain, one of the biggest constituents. They're neighbors. And they were not having each other. They were very upset with each other because they both wanted to discover things. And they wanted to find new trade routes. So the Pope actually gave everything on the southern hemisphere, so everything south of Spain and such, gave that all to Portugal. Portugal basically had the ability to go around the Cape because they were the first ones to find it. Well, here's the problem. When that happens, what does Spain do? They said, well, we still want a route. What do we do? And they said, well, the best way of doing this is exactly what Columbus did. Let's go west. So they were going west, thinking that they were going to find, again, Asia. Well, later on they found out they didn't find Asia. And so then they sent out more explorers to find more information about this area. As they found out that it was not Asia, they found out that they needed to discover more. And so in order to do that, take over more land. Now, as you know, when Christopher Columbus came over, he did start settling the area that he had found. But was that intentionally to make a new civilization, to expand the civilization when Columbus went? No, it wasn't. He was there to find Asia. That was all he wanted to do. Start up a settlement in Asia and trade. That's all he wanted to do. That was his purpose. Well, and to discover new things. But all of a sudden, when people find out that that is not Asia, that's a new land, then they started saying, hey, we want to conquer more of this land. And as they found more land before that point also, as they found more land that was not conquered by another European, they're like, hey, we can conquer these. We should conquer these. So what happens when all of a sudden you have a new land that's been found? Well, there's going to be a lot of people trying to conquer these lands. But you also want to say, you have other people that are saying, okay, so if we went south and then east, we'd find Asia going beyond Africa. If we went straight west, we'd find another land. Okay, if one is Asia, one is another land, a new world, there's got to be a way around that new world. So you started having people trying to go down below it and up above it, much like they did with Africa, going around the Cape and coming back up the eastern side of Africa. Well, the same thing happened with a new person. This one, you probably have heard before. His name is Ferdinand Magellan. Ferdinand Magellan, master shipman. So he was the one that was in charge of many ships. And again, go into the curriculum, you're going to get more of the details. But many ships, I think it was actually 5, and started sailing. Now, where did he sail? This is the map that we have. Now, if you're not on the YouTube, it's okay. I'm going to explain to you where he went. So starting off in Sanlúcar de Barrameda. So Sanlúcar de Barrameda, leaving Spain, basically, he traveled down the the west coast of Africa, past the Canary Islands, or through the Canary Islands, and down, southern he goes, down south he goes, continues to go. And this is where he finds, he lands in Rio de Janeiro Bay. So Rio de Janeiro is one of the biggest cities in Brazil. But also remember that Ferdinand Magellan was very important to who? Which country was Ferdinand Magellan actually part of? Was he part of Spain or was he part of Portugal? That's right, he was part of Portugal. What did Portugal have? The ability to sail south. So if you're looking at the map and you're looking at their YouTube channel, you'll actually see that he went south, which is what the Pope was allowing them to do. So there was a line in the middle of the globe that basically said anything south is what can be taken by the Portuguese. Anything north can be taken by the Spanish. And so this Portuguese explorer said there's got to be more, and there's got to be a way to Asia around this new world. Now, funny enough, he could have actually explored more of the new world, but that wasn't his task. His task, as he sold it to the king in Portugal, was to sail around the new world and find a route to Asia. And then the hope is possibly he'd turn around and come back. But what would happen if you went around the world and went too far? Now, here's what happened. So he goes down the east coast of South America, and he comes around the Cape. Now, this is actually what you would call now the Straits of Magellan. Yes, named after him. They come around the straits. Now, straits are very treacherous. They lose one ship that sails back to Portugal as they start going down. They lose another ship, I think might have been sunk, or it was turned around and he had to go home in the south part of South America. And then he makes it to the other side, to the Pacific Ocean. Now, does he know he's in the Pacific Ocean? No. How would you know at all? There's no satellites. There's no maps of this area. How does he know he's in, quote unquote, the Pacific Ocean? Which, again, explorers have actually gone to because, again, they've been visiting Asia for a while. And they know that Asia has an ocean next to it. But there's no real record of if those in Asia went across as well. So there's no telling of how far this is. Well, here's the problem. What happens when you have all these men on a ship and you sail from the point of South America, the southernmost point, the coldest point as well, and you start traveling across the Pacific Ocean? So I'll give you some dates, and this is very important to know. Now, just remember, in the southern hemisphere, when you're traveling down in South America during the winter, it's really cold for us up here, right? Up in the north. Down in South America, it's actually the opposite. This is their summer. During our winter, it's their summer. So, as Ferdinand Magellan was coming down, he came down and he reached Rio de Janeiro sometime around between November 29th and December 13th. And this is of 1519. So November to December. If it was up north, it'd be getting colder. Down south, it's actually warming up. So he travels around and he makes it to Rio de la Plata, which I think is right around the border of Argentina and Brazil. Well, actually, Argentina and like Uruguay and such. So he continues down. He makes it to Puerto La Julian, Puerto de San Julian, Puerto San Julian, which means port of San Julian. Okay, so he makes it there March 31st. What is happening on March 31st? Well, it's becoming our summer, which means it's becoming their winter down there. So it's getting cold. And because it's getting cold, they actually have to camp until the ice and the snow go away. So they actually camp around October 21st. So they actually make it to Cabo Vergenes, which means Cape Vergenes, which means the Cape of Vergenes, in October 21st, 1520. So they actually had to wait through the summer, our summer of North America, their winter of South America, and they were able to finally leave. And then they floated around the Cape, reaching the other side of the Cape around November 28th, 1520. Now, as they get to this point, they're like, we're on the other side. The tides are different here. We've gotten around this area. Let's continue to go east. Yes, because we should be able to find Asia fairly soon. Again, remember, we know that the globe is circular, right? There's a lot of people that actually thought it was more like an oval or an ellipsis, a shrunken circle. Basically, I was going to say like a deflated basketball, but it's not. It's like an egg. There you go. The shape of an egg. So some people thought that the Earth was more like a shape of an egg. So they thought, oh, it wouldn't take that long to get to Asia. Well, it does. Actually, they get to Sharks Islands. Yeah, there's actually an island called Sharks, like plural possessive. Sharks own this island around January 21st. Woo! My birthday! In 1521. Okay, remember they left November 28th. And they arrived 2 months later, almost, January 21st, at this new island. Problem is, what's happening to all of the people on his ship? It's 2 months of being in close quarters, of being next to your friend or now frenemy because of that. But they keep going. So then they travel a little bit further. On February 4th, 1521, they make it to San Pablo Island. So this is also called the Flint Islands. So they did make it to another island. Great. They were able to get a few more provisions together. They were able to get off the ship, get away from their frenemy, and then they had to take off again. So then they get back in the ship, and by March 6th, 1521, they make it to Ladrones Islands. So what's important there is this is getting close to the end for Magellan. Magellan actually dies on the trip, but not yet. So he goes in and he makes it to Somar and to Homanhan around March 17th. And then he makes it to a few more islands, and then he gets to Mactan. What happens? Oh, Mactan. What happens in Mactan? This is where, and this is a Filipino island, around the Philippines. He's killed. So they go in thinking that they can make friends with the natives, as they've made friends with other natives at other islands. But at this one, or actually conquering them, because some of them they did conquer. Here, the natives found out that they were coming. And what did they do? And how did they find out? Other tribes actually came to warn them. So what happened when the Portuguese showed up? Well, they weren't too happy with them and ended up chasing them back. And as they were running for the ship at low tide, which means the ship was stuck, well, somewhat stuck, they caught up with Ferdinand Magellan and ended his life. So the ship then takes off from there, knowing that, well, can't do anything about it. He's dead, and we're just going to die if we stake around. Jump back on the ship, and they sail off. And they sail to a whole bunch of other Indonesian islands and such. Never make it to Australia, though they're so close. And then they take off. So January 25th, 1522. Remember, our winter, their summer, because it's in the southern hemisphere. So they jump back in the ship January, this time without their explorer, without their captain. So, well, okay, captain. They were now captained by a new person, which I can't remember his name. Look it up. It's in the curriculum. And they jump in the ship and they sail across the Indian Ocean. Interesting enough, they totally bypass India. Why is that? Probably because they have one ship left and no captain, or at least lost their captain. So they make it to Cape of Good Hope, the southern tip of Africa, May 19th, 1522, and sail north because they know they've come around the Cape now, and they've made it back to Portugal again. Now, with coming back to Portugal, they didn't have a captain, but they are told basically, or they realize they have now been the first person, first people, first ship to circumnavigate the globe. So, this was a very important factor for them. Okay, so what else is happening at this point. Okay, let's go on to the next person that is so important. His name is now Hernán Cortés. Now, Hernán Cortés is famous for what thing? What one thing was he most famous for? That's right, taking over the Aztecs. The Aztecs were essential. They were a huge population in Mexico. And so at this point, they knew that when they found this great civilization, that Hernán Cortés decided he had to take it over. But there's some intrigue in here and some questionable things that happened during that time. Okay, so remember, this is 1519 to 1522. Hernán Cortés, let me show you this. Hernán Cortés, nope, let me zoom out of this. Oh, and this is one of the ships you would have seen them sailing in. Okay, there he is. Okay, Hernán Cortés. He was not a normal navigator. He was not a normal captain of a ship. He was a conquistador, a leader for the conquistadors. Oops. And so he was actually very important to the Spanish in the Caribbean islands and such. But here's the thing. He was not a governor. Well, he was a governor at one point. But he was not a governor. He was not someone of major importance. But he did have someone that was very important to him and his life and his exploration. And this was the governor at the time of his wanting to explore. I'm actually looking up the name right now. It's in the curriculum. All this stuff is in the curriculum. So I wish I had the best of memories when it came to this. So that's why I want you to be able to read the curriculum and understand all these parts and pieces. I'm here to help you in your journey, but not do your work for you. Your part is actually to go deeper into it. Okay, so Hernán Cortés goes through life getting the way all the way to Cuba. He comes to Cuba about 1511, accompanied by someone that's very important, and this is Diego Veracruz de Suelar. So Cortés is with Suelar, who is an aide of the governor of Hispaniola. So he comes over with this person. Now, Velázquez? Sorry, I apologize for me mispronouncing his name. Velázquez was then appointed governor of New Spain. Now, New Spain was based out of Hispaniola at the time. It will soon move. So he is friends or knows Cortés fairly well. So in his new position of power, he also made him a great source of leadership. And so he was able to say, hey, Cortés, it is now 1514. I'm going to send you on an assignment. I want you to go into the mainland, the land that they know is there at this point, but have not been able to get very far into. And I want you to find out more information into it. Now, the intrigue here is that we don't know exactly what was happening during this time. Some say that when Cortés left, there was an understanding by the new governor that Cortés was doing something he was not supposed to do, which he had higher plans than the governor was sending him to do. So the idea, potentially, the conspiracy, is that the governor sent other explorers to go find him and to capture him and bring him home because he was doing things he wasn't supposed to. Now, the possibility is that when he made it to Veracruz, which is where they landed, that somebody went back and told the governor of this. Others say that there was news before he actually reached there. So what exactly happened? No one really knows. It's all an assumption based on the historical aspects, but it depends on who you talk to. Okay, so this is one of the things that you're gonna have to do. And there's other things such as like romances with the governor, the sister-in-law of the governor. There's other intrigues as well that's going on. But for this point, I'm not going to go into that. I'm just letting you know that there was some of these interesting conspiracies that were going on. If you want to do more research, please do. I'm just giving you more information so you can actually look it up. But what was happening to Cortez? What did Cortez do? So he sails. Let me see. I think I didn't have. Okay, I should have had a picture. It would have shown him sailing from Cuba, from Hispaniola in Cuba, all the way over to about where we would say would Veracruz be. Sorry. So what makes this important is Veracruz is on the east coast of Mexico, and he leaves his ships there. Now, there are questions if Cortez burned the ships so that his men knew there was no way going back. But that is most likely a myth. But there's all these different stories of all these things. I don't know how. We don't know more about Cortez. I actually want to know that. So maybe I'll go look it up after this, and I'll come back and tell you. But what did Cortez do at that point? So he leaves Veracruz and starts going northwest up the coast. He gets to La Antigua and travels around a little bit, but always comes back to La Antigua or this area. And then he starts moving. Well, we can't really go north. We don't want to go back down south because that's where the ships were. Let's go west. So he is introduced to multiple tribes that are here. Now, first one, in this area where he keeps going back, there is the Sampoala. So the Sampoala tribe is right around here, this area. Then he gets around to Zico, where the Zalapa are here in this area. What is he doing with these tribes? He's conquering, or he's making friends with them. And the reason why he's doing this is if you conquer them, there's always a question if they're going to come back at you. If you make friends with them, wine them, dine them, give them things, then they're going to be more accepting of you and actually want to help you. What does he find out? At this point, he finds out that this grand, huge empire has taken over this whole area. They have conquered all of these people, imprisoned, enslaved, and demanded tribute to all of these other tribes. So what does the tribes think? Is like, well, we don't like these people, and we now have these Spanish people or these alien-like people from another world that have like pale skin, but they have weapons, and they have horses, and they have other things. Maybe if we side with them, we can free ourselves from the Aztecs. Or the city of Tenochtitlan. Remember, we talked about that. It's on the lake of Texcoco. So they start moving west, starting to go through all these different lands, conquering different tribes that would not participate, and becoming friends with other ones. The next one is the Tlaxcala. The Tlaxcala were another tribe that were enslaved by the people in Tenochtitlan, the Aztecs. So they joined up as well. So now you have two tribes of people. And they actually find a few other ones. The Choula, say that 5 times fast. Choula. I did it. Sweet. Okay. So you get to this point, and what happens? They are gathering almost this army. But as they get close to Tenochtitlan, Cortez gets smart. He's like, wait a second. And it might not have been him. It might have been the other ones that said, hey, let us go in and tell them about you. And then you can come in as heroes or important people or even gods. And so they said, sure. So they sent a few of the people into the city of Tenochtitlan to go tell, who was it? His name was Montezuma II, and he is the leader of Tenochtitlan and the Aztecs. So they start traveling through, and what happens? They come in, and they start making friends with him. And I'm not going to tell you what happens. What? You're not going to tell us what happens? No, I'm not going to tell you what happens. Why? Because I want you to find out more information. I want you to do your own research. What happens when Cortez makes it through all of this land, through much of Mexico, like halfway through Mexico, being guarded, by being helped, by being assisted, by conquering other tribes? What then happens when he enters Tenochtitlan? Again, this is for you to find out. I got you started on this journey. I want you to figure it out. And then come back to me, email me if you have questions. I've received very few questions. I know you have them. Please let me know. I'd love to answer them. I'd love to be able to see what you're thinking and the questions that you have, because this is going to make it easier for me to make a better curriculum, make it better for me to make a better podcast. If there's things that you're wondering, I'd love to investigate it for you. So please send me emails, ask me questions. I'd love to help. I can't help until I know what you want and what you're wondering. So yes, thank you so much for joining me on this great Adventure Box podcast as we discovered the trip of Ferdinand Magellan and his route. Sadly, he did not make it all the way, but he was the first explorer to send an expedition around the world, completely around the world. Who was the other person? Hernán Cortés. Now, Cortés, again, is very important because he's able to do something with the Aztecs. And I know I said it earlier in this podcast. I'm not going to say it again because I want you to find out what happened. And then all it takes is looking at the curriculum or going online. Find out what happens and then find out what happens afterwards, because afterwards is what creates the whole future of Mexico. If it wasn't for Cortez doing this, it would be completely different, or at least it would have taken longer time to have been resolved. If Montezuma had actually taken over the Spanish instead of the Spanish and Cortez taking over the Aztecs, things would have been different. Because we know that the Mayas, we talked about this, that last curriculum, we talked about this. The Mayas actually held off against the Spanish for a long time, even though they were decentralized, even though they were spread out at this point. They fought off the Spanish. What happened to the Aztecs? Can't wait for you to find out and ask me questions. Thank you so much for joining me on this Adventure Box podcast. Can't wait to talk to you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.